and welcome everyone to Women's Health Tech Wednesdays. I am your host, Nina Joshi. And before I introduce our lovely guest for today's episode, just wanted to quickly announce that we have our Innovator Summit next week from the 29th to December 1st. Please be sure to check that out. It's going to be a phenomenal event. All of the registration information, as well as the promo code, is available in the chat. So looking very excited for that. So please be sure to check that out. And then with that, would like to formally bring on our guest, Heidi Dohse, who is the president and founder of Tour de Heart. Hi, Heidi. Thanks so much for being here today.
Well, hello, Nina. How are you?
I'm doing well. Can't complain. What about you?
A little chilly, but really excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And before I forget, for anyone that has a question for Heidi, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, and I will make sure that we get to it. I know that this is going to be an episode chock-a-block of a lot of great insight. So with that, let's just dive into it. Of course, as this being a Women's Health Tech webinar, I have to ask you, what does Women's Health Tech mean to you?
Oh, gosh. Well, you know, so really, it actually means a lot. When we think about women in healthcare and women needing healthcare, it's kind of, I was diagnosed really young with a rare cardio arrhythmia, but no one took me seriously as a kid. And it was always like, oh, you're just not getting enough salt in your diet. When I was a young kid, because I was an athlete. Mm-hmm. But when I reached 13, 14 years old, the doctors were saying, oh, it's your hormones. So as women, when we think about how often we're sort of diagnosed with, oh, it's hormones, oh, this is just what you're feeling.
Right.
What this whole concept of health tech means to me is that it allows us to have data to back up our feelings. And when we use data as the common language to talk with providers or interact with the healthcare system, all of a sudden feelings and intuition have something that they're willing, the data makes that more real and actionable. So I think that's one of the advantages as a woman and you using health tech, but also how we can create applications and tools to empower more women to have a better experience and get the care or things that they need and not have to be based on waiting for them to take your feelings seriously.
Yeah, I think what a powerful sentiment of this idea of like data is also your advocate, so that you don't have to only use your words and you kind of fighting for something to be that. That's very powerful.
It's some lived experience. Mm-hmm. And I've learned that the more data I have, the more opportunity I have to be my own advocate and be a co-collaborator in my care. So, and I think empowering more people to have that will bring more patient voices into the making those voices useful in design and development of health tech applications.
Absolutely. What a great definition. I love it. And kind of on that note, you'd shared a little bit more about maybe some of the lived experience that you've had that it seems like has really shaped, your career and really the work that you're doing. But would love if you could just kind of give us the retrospective and just tell us a little bit more about yourself, your journey. We want to know, Heidi, kind of on that deeper level.
Okay, well, it is the road less traveled to get to what I'm doing today, and it started as, like I said, a young girl who started playing competitive sports at the age of 7, and so I was a competitive, growing up in Southern California, played soccer, tennis, cross country, competitive. Skier, professional windsurfer. And so my whole life was built on being healthy. Right. So the idea that I was not healthy, that it turns out I had a rare cardio arrhythmia and was diagnosed, at the age of 18, I went in for knee surgery to go clean up the mess I was making playing sports. And next thing you know, they do an EKG and find out I have this crazy heart disease. And I went from canceling knee surgery to the coronary care unit. So this is something that's, how often do we today hear about people that are just either drop dead from heart cardiovascular issues? I was that kid. Yeah. So being told that they didn't know how long I was going to live, and they didn't know why I had lived as long as I did, left me with, well, I see my future as maybe I should go to Maui and windsurf. So did that, came back, became an experimental patient where they ablated my AV node, rewired me. And that was sort of my journey. I got better. I went back to playing all the sports and doing all the things that I do. When I was a professional windsurfer, looking at my future living in Hood River, Oregon, because it was all about living in quality of life communities, a friend of mine and I started an internet company. I'm going to date myself, but in 1993, because otherwise my future looked like real estate agent, cocktail waitress, or real estate, retail store manager. And I didn't want to do those things. People told us the internet's a fad. No one was going to use it. 1993, we built a little web server with a fractional T1. We were building, websites in exchange for food and snowboard clothing. Realized we needed a paying customer and did an internet gopher search for internet help wanted. And our first paying customer was Bank of America. So in 1995, I was the original webmaster, having launched www.bankamerica.com, build your own bank. And I was a consultant. I went from windsurfer to consulting systems engineer because I knew 5 more buzzwords up in the internet than anybody else. That then led to becoming a product manager in Chicago, and I was responsible for web hosting e-commerce solutions for the Baby Bells. That sent me to Europe. I lived in Europe rolling out web hosting, e-commerce, internet technology in 14 countries in Europe, came back to the US. And that had kind of set my path as a technologist in internet technologies, developing solutions and working with Fortune 500 companies, and then more of the internet-based startups, where I had a mentor that took me to VeriSign. And at VeriSign, I was the chief of staff. And I had this, ended up with this whole technology background. But at the same time, personally, I was still an athlete. I started using my polar heart rate monitor. I guess I should mention that as part of my journey as a patient, I had my first pacemaker implanted in 1983. So I've been 100% pacemaker dependent since then, but I didn't want to be limited in the lifestyle choices. So I was using my polar heart rate monitor to determine how my pacemaker was working and what my heart was doing. And this is where I could feel things that were happening. My physicians were like, oh, you can't feel that. So I would I could take the data that I was getting from, real world, right, taking that into the clinic, and we would recreate what I was feeling in the lab. And they're like, oh, wow, you can feel that. So we started optimizing my pacemaker in order for me to still be a competitive athlete. And this is where my personal life and my professional life started to collide. Right. So from, I wanted to become more involved in companies building healthcare solutions with this vision of data-driven really data being able to empower better patient outcomes. And how do we begin to use a lot of these consumer tools to improve what and how we deliver care? And then that's what led me first to J&J, and then from J&J I was recruited to Google in their core infrastructure engineering organization. And using the 20% program, I was able to use my 20% time to ping everyone in Google and say, do anything with healthcare, do anything with healthcare. And I initiated a lot of their original healthcare optimized cloud infrastructure. Wow. From there, started traveling all over the world on educating industry on the power of data, how to create data interoperability and data pipelines into cloud infrastructure. So that's sort of how I got to what I do now.
What an illustrious career that has, what a journey, I would say.
It was not, went to school, got a degree. I have a fine arts degree.
That's absolutely incredible. And I could imagine how all of these things that, these experiences that you've had have really just been, you just getting skills, adding tools to your toolkit that I would imagine has kind of led us to this moment with Tour de Heart. Would love if you could tell us a little bit more about, what was that catalyst for you that really made you decide to, to establish this company, and a little bit more about Tour de Heart.
Sure. So one of the things that I learned on my journey is that when you think about cardiovascular disease, and this is something I've lived with all my life, we don't have inspirational heroes. We don't have role models. We don't even have positive messaging.
Right.
But when you think in your head, the person that is diagnosed with cardiovascular disease, what does that person look like? Probably overweight. They're probably, not eating well. They got old. They don't get enough exercise. Well, in many ways, the messaging is you've boarded the death train. How fast do you want it to go? And I have always, again, I've had 8 pacemakers. I've had open heart surgery. I've had lung surgery, and I never wanted to be limited or be put in a bucket of, oh, poor you. And so by doing that and really leveraging digital, an Apple Watch on one arm and a Garmin on another, I started getting a reputation in industry as a unicorn. It's like, oh, you're one in a million. You have this unique perspective. And it's like, I don't want to be one in a million.
Right.
Tour de Heart is all about helping a million people be like me. And it starts by first inspiring people to choose to get well, and providing them the tools and the technologies that allow them to create that roadmap that is personalized for them to reach goals that are important and that they want to, feel like they have skin in the game to do the work to get well. And that's where this merger of bringing, and empowering people to have that knowledge that they're creating themselves. And Tour de Heart provides, education, instruction, finding those stories and working with other athletes diagnosed with heart disease and helping them get their lives back. And really just, that's sort of the premise. And then bringing those voices to industry and especially in med tech and medical device,
right.
They're looking for more patient input, being able to bring these voices to the table and help them provide input so that the industry can see that it's not a 65 to 85-year-old, it's many people. And the outliers outside the box are just as important as the people they define in the box. And let's make the box bigger and have messaging that speaks to more people.
Wow, that is absolutely incredible. And I really love just this mission of, being able to, it almost seems like to normalize, like, this is what this looks like. And exactly like you were saying, that every person's story is valid, is something that needs to be taken into consideration. And I think that is absolutely beautiful. What an amazing mission.
We're all more than the diseases we live with. And healthcare is something that oftentimes people feel is done to them. And then they need to limit their lifestyle to be near the thing, to be near healthcare.
Yeah.
Again, the value of health tech and the value of letting people be so much more and focus on the exciting things that they want to wake up for and engage with each day, and then giving them the tools to still feel connected, but not limited. And I think that's what's exciting.
I want to write it down somewhere. I just love that quote of a lot of people feel that healthcare is something that's happening to them. And I think that is very true. I feel like there is kind of this passive relationship of, I am the recipient, I'm not an active participant. And so I love that you're bringing that empowerment back.
Yeah. And if we think about, what is going on in health tech today, so many of these amazing apps and wearables that are available to any of us. And we're engaging with those those tools, and we're finding interesting insights. And then all of a sudden, much like the retail experience where you go into a store, even a grocery store, you have choice. You own your pathway. And then that's what's allowing people to do with healthcare now. It starts with wellness and preventative and knowing your body. And then that's starting to bump right up against traditional healthcare. And for a long time, traditional healthcare was like, nope, never going to happen. We have the white coats, we have the ivory towers. And guess what? It's happening. And people are really feeling like they have some control. And it doesn't have to be done to them. It can be done with them. And that's where helping to bring industry into this. It's happening whether you like it or not. The consumerization of healthcare is turning people into empowered users.
100%. And I think on that note too, since you kind of mentioned kind of the digital health component, for you, what is kind of the impact that you see when it comes to digital health and maybe the goals of True to Heart? Or do you have any lived experience that have, either shown the opportunities or the barriers when it comes to digital health?
Yeah. So again, I've sort of been on this very lonely journey of digital health since 1998. And I'm so excited that in the past 5 years, it's become a thing. We're having these discussions. As I mentioned, I used to talk to physicians or industry, like this whole concept of the patient showing up with data collected in the context of living their life. And I was told it was never going to happen. Well, it is happening, but now we almost have the flip side of the challenges are that the healthcare industry is trying to figure out what the heck do you do with all of this data? How do we begin to process it so that it's not overwhelming? We have these amazing caregivers and physicians that can diagnose and treat many kinds of conditions. And now we want them to become technicians on top of that. So creating an easy way for them to use essentially the actionable insights generated from devices, right? Not having them, write the algorithm that does that. So, we're in this. That's where the challenge and opportunity is now. Is data streamlining, data interoperability, the AI and ML components of, finding that needle in a haystack. To have that aha moment that causes a physician to more quickly get to a path of a therapeutic or a procedure. So we're getting there. It's trying not to overwhelm the healthcare systems.
Yeah, I think that you bring up a very, good point about the kind of the technology, but also kind of the infrastructure that's kind of needed, whether that's from a change management training, additional systems that can help support so that it kind of carries it all the way through. So I definitely think that's like a very good point when we think about it from a broader ecosystem perspective, while still making it very patient-centered.
Yeah. And this is something as innovators are thinking about developing, a new health tech tool. It's always hey, we've got some doctors that really love it. It's like, okay, that's awesome. However, to get adoption, the hospital system, you need to think about how does your tool or application, what it does, how does it input into the business operations that a hospital system or a clinician has today. And it's the getting your, interacting and integrating into those systems that's most important. And ultimately, as they are making changes with CMS or CPT codes and what's billable, because again, you can't have the expectation that the physician's going to just look at that data and take on the liability of the perception of, oh, well, you didn't see you missed it. Well, it's your fault. So we can't set them up for failure. So it's how does that insight become part of the patient EHR? So what is that integration? So essentially it's got the ability to be managed. and not change, somebody who's innovating something can't expect the system to change to adopt their technology. It's how does your technology integrate into the existing systems, and what is your ability to educate and make it easy for your stakeholders and end users to engage in, integrate into their daily life.
Absolutely. I think that is so key. Being able to have something that is scalable, that does kind of fit well within a system that is already so crazy and complex, and definitely not very flexible to just, take on every single new piece of technology. So I think that's definitely a very key consideration as, there are so many amazing, innovative people that are working on these types of technology, being able to kind of set that up for success. I think that makes a lot of sense. I actually wanted to ask you, you had said this a little bit earlier as you're kind of describing the work that you do with True to Heart about kind of making sure that, voices are heard as it relates to new types of devices or technology. And so really wanted to get a sense from you, how can we incorporate the patient's needs, their voices more in kind of the development, whether that's clinical trial or even just product development?
Right. So it's interesting. And again, this is where I'm so excited as an industry where health tech is going. If you think about, so FDA now has their Digital Health Center of Excellence, and they also have and are spinning up an entire patient engagement component at FDA. There's also PCORI. If you're familiar with PCORI has, and I'm actually on their patient engagement advisory panel, where they look at creating research that is based on a patient being a part of the clinical trial. So I've had a couple of studies where I've been the patient PI, and really thinking about how do you design a study from a patient point of view so that you will then be able to onboard and engage more of a cohort because it feels more meaningful. And the same thing in just product development. So the work that I do at MDIC, which is the Medical Device Innovation Consortium, I facilitate the patient advisory group, where it's a group of patients with a variety of different disease types or chronic conditions where they rely on medical devices, and bringing those voices directly to the companies and their product teams to be able to interview, a medical device product team, being able to talk to a real patient, and maybe not the patient that they had written the persona for, but instead the patient who's living day to day, and here's all the other things they have to manage. Right. Is your healthcare technology really something that's going to fit in what they do? So that's a lot of what True to Heart is doing, is bringing, kind of playing matchmaker in both product development and in clinical research. But on the flip side, also helping patients see what's possible by using these tools also, and being more compliant in their care.
Absolutely. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think the visibility of a lot of these types of things, I think, is so key, because that is how you really be able to drive change, but in a way that's very intentional. That is exactly kind of speaking to what the patient really needs and what's going to support them the best. So I think I love this matchmaking program.
Well, think about it. Healthcare is kind of the one industry, every other industry that creates a product that has a consumer, they go and talk to that consumer. They do focus groups, and they're like, what would you like? How would you use it? And they take that feedback and they iterate. Well, then there's healthcare, and healthcare basically talks to some physicians about how that physician wants to engage with that technology or that medical device.
Right.
And then it's just supposed to be expected that patients will like it. And it gets back to the things that are done to us as patients. Absolutely. And no one talks to the patient. And many companies feel like, oh, but we talk to physicians. It's like, well, physicians aren't necessarily living, so being able to bring the direct. And then I think when we build things for the actual end user,
absolutely,
care, they're going to have like these amazing outcomes and be more willing to, provide feedback instead of, we just didn't use it. It was mean. It did not feel meaningful in
Right.
my personal goals. And again, personalizing in healthcare, another one of my sort of pet peeves is how often does a conversation start with, what are your goals as a patient? It's always, here's what you have, and this is what we're going to do.
Right.
But if you start with what are your goals, imagine how you then tailor the what you're going to do and how you're going to do it so that that outcome and those goals feel possible.
That is a very, very good point. I think it always kind of is circling back to this idea of, passive versus being an active participant. And I love that you mentioned that by incorporating patient voices, it's actually making the tool, the system so much better from an outcome perspective, from an adherence perspective. It really is in, I think, everyone's best interest to be able to incorporate these voices, which I think makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and so that's where I feel like health tech is making that possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what's exciting.
100%. And I just realized it's already at the top of the hour. Where did this time go? I feel like, there's so many additional questions I have for you. We definitely need to do kind of a part 2 to this conversation.
That would be great.
Right? I'm like, I just looked at the clock and I noticed it and I was like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, I guess we didn't have to worry about trying to fill the time, did we?
That's right. Well, thank you so much, Heidi, for, I would say, kind of the prequel to definitely more conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. And I look forward to seeing everybody again soon.
Absolutely. And also just wanted to let everyone know that we will not be having an episode next Wednesday. I think we all are getting ready for Thanksgiving on Thursday. So we'll be kind of giving everyone that time back. So please check us out that following week. Also wanted to let everyone know about our Innovator Summit next week. So please make sure that you check that out. All of that registration information is available. Thank you to our sponsors, Goodwin and Witham, for this conversation, as well as to our guest, Heidi. Really appreciate you taking the time, and we'll definitely see everyone not next week, but the week after. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.